Hello everyone. I've been working as a family medicine doc for a long time, and I've been working long enough to see people try just about every single diet out there and have it work for a while and then stop working, and then they regain all the weight that they lost and then some, which is a very, very discouraging process. And for a long time, actually over the years that I've been working, I've seen more and more people struggling harder to lose more and more weight. So the problem seems to be getting worse. And I've seen just how, hard people really do try, and just how terrifically discouraging it can be when it doesn't work, especially if they regain all the weight they lost. So for a long time I was mystified. Why is this happening? I was just as confused about it as my patients. But over the years, the picture has clarified. And what helped everything come clear was focusing on body fat as an organ that has a positive role in the body. And then examining how our body fat might be affected by the astronomical increase in seed oil consumption that's been taking place over the past 70 or so years. We don't talk about our body fat this way very often, but it is actually designed to be an ally in our health. And it's an organ, an independent organ with a very important role in your health. Just like every other organ, it has a role. And the role of body fat is to be able to fuel your cells with energy between meals. But when the main source of our dietary fat is seed oils that are chemically very different from the fats that we used to eat because their fatty acid makeup is different, they're high in PUFA, and we'll talk about what that is. Our body fat becomes very different than what it used to be. So when I looked at whether or not our high PUFA body fat can still do its job, which is to supply us with energy between meals, I found that disturbingly the answer is quite often no, it cannot do that main job. So mitochondria are the little organelles inside every one of your cells that burn your body fat and convert it to energy. And when your body fat is too full of PUFA, your mitochondria have a problem because too much PUFA can shut down your mitochondria. So I'm going to show you that high PUFA body fat is the best explanation for our modern epidemics of chronic disease and obesity. And I'm going to show you that our high seed oil diet traps us in a tragic, vicious cycle of unhealthy eating, organ damage, metabolic dependence on sugar, and this causes food addictions, the metabolic dependence on sugar, that just demolish our willpower and very often our self-esteem, because they make staying away from healthy food impossible until you learn how to escape the cycle. These are my financial interests. I'm a book author, been writing for almost 20 years about how and why to avoid seed oils and what to eat instead. I advise and consult for a couple of companies, and I am a family medicine doctor. I've been working in the field of family medicine for over 2 decades, and primarily treating people for seed oil-induced diseases, chronic diseases. So let's talk about this cycle, this seed oil wheel of misfortune. And we're going to start at the step one, how you get into the cycle, by eating seed oils. These are seed oils. There's 8 of them. I call them the hateful 8. The top 6 are the kind that you need to look for on labels. The bottom 2, not really used in products you buy in a grocery store, mostly in restaurants. These seed oils, collectively, are what makes junk food junk. And I'm going to tell you why they're unhealthy. They're unhealthy because there are toxins that get generated during refining of these fats. In other words, you can eat soy and corn and sunflower seeds, and that's totally fine. The problem is that the heat and the chemicals and the treatment that happens in the factory to extract the, in some cases, minute amount of oil from the seed, make it profitable, damage the oil and create toxins that don't exist in the seed. This is the last thing seed oil should be used for. This is a deep fryer filled with soy oil. And the restaurant workers who breathe this in are at risk for developing lung cancer from the volatile toxins. And when those volatiles get on your uniform, it forms a varnish that is difficult to wash out and has actually, it's combustible, it has burned down a couple of laundromats. Deep fryers filled with soy oil are toxin-generating machines. And foods cooked in any kind of seed oil this way should have health warnings like cigarettes and alcohol do. Nobody should cook with seed oils because when you do, you create a massive amount of new toxins that you either breathe in or eat or both. But again, none of these are in the seed. And these are very similar to the toxins that develop during the factory. The same processes can occur every time you heat an oil. And so when you deep fry it, you're really heating it. You're heating it up to a couple hundred degrees for an extended time period. So the more heat and the more time, the more toxins. And it's coming from the polyunsaturated part of the fats, of the polyunsaturated types of fatty acids that are in the oils. And the reason that these oils are unhealthy is, and the defining feature of junk food is because they are high in these polyunsaturated fatty acids which deteriorate when you heat with them and when you process them. There is actually an army of scientists who have been trying to mitigate the toxin development during both the refining and the heating. These are the seed oil scientists. They work in the industry and they are constantly looking for ways to make the oil as less toxic as possible. And this is a gentleman who gave a conference in the past year about this very subject, and he was talking about like why have we failed to really make them toxin free and over the past 150 years that we've been trying to do so. And the answer is because of chemistry. It's just that's just the basic chemistry of the polyunsaturated fatty acids, the very types of fatty acids that the American Heart Association and Harvard tell us to be eating more of. But so it's straight out of the factory in the bottle because of the processing. There's toxins, as I mentioned. How many? Well, in your average bottle, about 5%. This is from canola oil. This is a study that looked at what happened to canola oil after processing, and this is before being thrown in the deep fat fryer and heated again. And many of the fat-soluble vitamins are lost, 75% of the E vitamins, 80% of the vitamin A, and pretty much 100% of the minerals are stripped out. When I talk with my patients about, seed oils are toxic, and when we're just getting started with the conversation, they very often will tell me, oh, don't worry about me and seed oils, Dr. Cate, because I only cook with olive oil at home. And I have to tell them that it's not just what you're cooking with. Because these days, manufacturers, we eat a lot of foods that someone else made for us. And these days, while we have lots of other labels about it's free of this and it's free of that, if you're a health conscious consumer, you may be looking for some of these labels. But we do not have one for toxin-free, seed oil-free at this point in time. Maybe we should. I think we should. But you can be buying foods that you think are healthy, and unless you read the fine print on every label, you won't have a clue that they're loaded with seed oils. And same deal when you go out to eat at pretty much any kind of a chain restaurant, sit-down restaurant, whether it's fast food or not, 99% of the time it's a seed oil. They're not going to be cooking with olive oil, and increasingly they're using butter oil instead of actual butter, which may have zero butter in it or may have a blend with a small portion of butter. Here's an example of like why this is an organic infant formula. And so you might be thinking that, oh, I bought this at one of those more expensive boutique upscale store chains. I've got to be safe. I don't have to bother putting on my spectacles and reading the teeny tiny print. Well, you absolutely always do, because this organic infant formula, the first fat in here is safflower or sunflower oil, and the second one is soybean oil. So these little babies are just getting a ton of seed oils if this is what you're buying for them, thinking it's okay because it's organic. So because they have worked their way so extensively into the food supply, they're now a full 30% of the average person's daily calories. So the average person gets somewhere around 3,600 calories. That translates to 1,200 from seed oils. Why am I making such a big deal out of this? Well, because certainly if you are eating food, as other people have talked about today, if you're eating like restaurant deep fryer food that was cooked in those seed oils, those are definitely full of toxins. You probably heard about that today from other speakers at the summit. Well, I want to show you why it's not just the deep fried food that, you know, you can avoid deep fryer food and still have serious metabolic problems because of the PUFAs. The very fatty acid that the American Heart Association says we need to eat more of, so that we can avoid saturated fatty acid. So let's talk about PUFA. I've mentioned it a few times. So what is it? Well, probably the word of the day today should be PUFA. I think everyone's been talking about these. PUFA stands for polyunsaturated fatty acid. And it's the special chemistry of these special fatty acids that makes seed oil so toxic. So I want to just show you just briefly the difference between different types of fatty acids that we're talking about here. So there's 4 different types that I'm showing you, and 2 big categories. There's saturated and unsaturated. And where it says low chance over here, that's a low chance of oxygen attacking this thing and starting off a reaction that ends up leading to toxins. When you look at the unsaturated fatty acids, the chances are higher. And that's because oxygen loves to attack double bonds. Oxygen really can't even control itself around 2 double bonds in a row. So where you see 2 double bonds and 3 double bonds, this is I'm sorry, it's cut off, 1 to 10 billion times higher chance of oxygen attacking this particular polyunsaturated fatty acid, which is actually an omega-3 fat. So omega-6 and omega-3 are both problems because of the oxidation. I know a lot of other folks talk about omega-3 as if it's somehow like the savior for everything because it's anti-inflammatory. And what I want you to take home from this lesson today is that all PUFA is pro-inflammatory when oxygen attacks it. And in the amount that we consume now, we can't control that oxygen attack. And that's a whole different level of problem than what you get from just the omega-6 versus omega-3 ratio and how that affects the metabolites. That's a minute problem compared to this massive problem of toxin generation. And part of the reason it's a massive problem is because once it gets started, once an oxygen finds a way to attack the PUFA, then the polyunsaturated fatty acid itself becomes dangerous. What this is showing is that polyunsaturated fatty acid gets activated into something called a free radical. And a free radical is dangerous in the same way that radiation is dangerous. And it attacks other PUFA molecules so fast it can damage 1 billion other PUFA molecules in 1 second. So it's an extremely destructive kind of a chain reaction that generates all kinds of cellular disorganization and damage. It can polymerize your cell membranes. It can completely disrupt anything in its path. And the only way it will stop is if antioxidants in your body manage to trap this instead. So you have to have boatloads of antioxidants in your body for this to end before you've destroyed billions and billions of your polyunsaturated fatty acids and generated a gazillion, literally, that's the number, to new toxins that weren't there. The toxins come from the fatty acids breaking down and reacting with oxygen. They form, it's not spontaneously, but they react with oxygen and then they develop into toxins. So a functioning part of your cell, a totally healthy normal membrane that contains polyunsaturated fatty acid, can be a cell membrane or it can be a lipoprotein like LDL cholesterol. If it contains too much polyunsaturated fatty acid and oxygen attacks it, you can get this damaging reaction happening. You can get massive amounts of toxin forming and you get polymerization that just destroys everything that the cell is trying to do in that local area. So mitochondria, your mitochondria produce energy, right? So we're talking about, I'm talking about PUFA in the body fat. So I'm talking about PUFA as a fuel, and it's a fuel for your mitochondria. So your mitochondria have to manipulate that PUFA. Basically, they burn it, and they react it with oxygen in order to burn it. They can use different fuels, not just body fat. They can use sugar too. But it is oxygen, and it's not that they use, right? So I just showed you that oxygen and PUFA are a bad combination, especially when you get activated oxygen. And guess what mitochondria use? To break down chemical bonds and generate energy like this for your cell. So fuels come in to a mitochondria and they use activated oxygen to generate ATP, which is a form of cell energy. So that's great that mitochondria can do that, but that we need to give them fuels other than polyunsaturated fatty acids to do that. And I'm going to, go into like how you can control that. But the point I'm making right now is that when you are fueling your cells, your mitochondria get a hold of polyunsaturated fatty acid, it's like you've turned that mitochondria into a toxin-generating machine, because the same kinds of reactions that can occur in a deep fryer will occur in the mitochondria. The same chemistry applies, and you'll have the same laundry list of many multitudes of toxins forming because of your mitochondria trying to burn polyunsaturated fatty acids to give your cells the energy that they need to operate. So when this is what's happening, burning your body fat, if this is what's happening because your body fat is full of polyunsaturated fatty acid, it means that burning your body fat hurts your cells. And the word that we use for the kind of hurt is inflammation. It causes inflammation. Inflammation makes your cells sick. And if you've heard of pretty much any kind of disease that is a chronic disease, you will hear the word inflammation. There's a lot of inflammatory diseases out there. And what I'm saying, and what I've been saying for a long time, is that the number one source of inflammation in our food supply is the polyunsaturated fatty acids. It's responsible for the vast majority of inflammatory related health problems. and it's not just me saying this out of thin air. There's actually other scientists who study whether or not these same kind of reactions can happen in cells, right? I've been saying that the same chemistry applies in a deep fryer. And yes, the same chemistry actually does apply in living cells, in living systems. That's what this Dr. Spitaler is one of several who have been studying this. The first place many people feel all these toxins when they eat PUFA, like deep fried food, or anything cooked, and pan frying also develops numerous toxins. You feel it where it comes into your body, which is your digestive system. And it's so common, it's a meme on Twitter. Well, and the good news is once you stop eating seed oils, you stop damaging your intestinal tract, and you discover that a lot of foods you thought you had intolerances to, it was actually because your digestive system was so inflamed it couldn't properly deal with certain foods. But once you stop that inflammation, now you can broaden your diet and enjoy a lot more tasty and delicious and nutritious foods, especially things like dairy and meat. So we eat seed oils and they can turn our mitochondria into little mini deep fryers. Now I want to talk about your body fat, how seed oils build up and cause a chemical imbalance in your body fat that make your body fat itself a toxin-generating machine. And remember, our body fat is an organ with a job to do in the body. It's supposed to be providing our cells with energy. And what I'm saying is that in the same way you can damage your brain, you can damage your lungs with cigarettes, you can damage your liver with alcohol and other organs, you can also damage your body fat by having too much polyunsaturated fatty acids stored in your body fat. Not just by having too much of it. In fact, times were you could be obese and metabolically healthy before seed oils. And when I was a medical student and early in my career, they were still debating whether or not obesity was even a risk factor for mortality. Because a long time ago, you could be overweight and you would not be at increased risk for heart attack or cancer or strokes or other fatal diseases. But now you are. Now we've made obesity a deadly disease by causing body fat failure. And you damage your body fat by eating seed oils. We've radically reconstructed our body thanks to the American Heart Association and Harvard's 70-year experiment on us. They got us convinced that we should avoid saturated fatty acids, and we've been eating more polyunsaturated fatty acids, and it has redesigned our body, but in a horrible way, not in a good way. So now our body fat is about 30% PUFA. And I'm just wanting to point out that the body fat is, our body fat is an organ of energy storage. And so when we overeat a fatty acid like PUFA, polyunsaturated fatty acids, that's where they're going to go, right? We'll store anything in excess. But we can't, we can manipulate certain things to be safe to store. For example, sugar. Like, we don't store sugar in little crystals in our body fat. We actually convert chemically sugar molecules into fatty acid molecules. But we can't change the PUFA that we eat. We have to store it as it is. We have to store PUFA. We can't un-PUFA-ify it. And back in the day, PUFA is actually, I haven't mentioned this yet, but polyunsaturated fatty acids are a part of a healthy diet. We do need some. We need to have the omega-3 and the omega-6, but not for energy or fuel, for building blocks. We especially need both omega-3 and omega-6 for our nervous system. Our brain is like 50%. PUFAs, of those two types of PUFAs, the vast majority of fats in our brain are those two types of PUFAs, 50%. Half, not the majority. So back in the day, though, we used to get enough from our foods, from natural foods, to get all the building blocks. And how much do we get? Well, 5% was probably enough. What I've done is I've looked at like the historical record and of adipose biopsies and how much, what kind of foods people used to eat. And that's where I came up with these numbers. And if you want a reference for this, it's on my website. It's a PUFA project. I think that'll be on another slide. So our nature is trying to help us out, right? So we do have a way of protecting polyunsaturated fatty acids from being attacked by oxygen. We have something called antioxidants. We actually have antioxidant enzyme systems that protect our polyunsaturated fatty acids. And I'm pointing that out because it's not like the kind of antioxidants that you buy, like when you hear about blueberries are high in antioxidants. That really has nothing to do with how we protect the PUFA in our bodies once it gets in our bodies. It has a lot to do with when we cook with it and in our digestive systems. But the antioxidants that we eat really don't serve very much function. The antioxidants that is like in goji berries or whatever the berry du jour is, they don't function once they get in our body because we have enzymes for that. And the enzymes are super powerful. They can get in between oxygen. Once oxygen has activated a PUFA and turned it into a free radical and a cascade is happening, our antioxidants have a way of slipping in there. Our systems have a way of slipping in there and protecting the PUFA so that it can actually bring an end to those damaging cascades before they do very much damage. But we have to have because it's so quick, the PUFA cascades are so fast, we have to have a massive amount of these things. And we can actually overwhelm our systems when we have an overwhelming amount of PUFA in our diet. And in fact, if we're constantly asking our bodies, our antioxidant enzyme systems to basically sacrifice themselves to protect the PUFA, we can run out of antioxidants. And that's when we really, really get into trouble. And this is why, it can take a couple of years or decades before the toxicity of PUFA fully manifests. Once our enzyme systems are depleted like this and they can't protect then the PUFA, then we just get toxins starting to form. I'm not going to say spontaneously, but it's kind of spontaneous because there's always oxygen in our tissue, and when it happens to get activated enough, it will generate a toxin, and we just can't stop it. We lack the antioxidant capacity to stop it. And this is really bad. Once you get here, you are prone for you're just a setup for all kinds of inflammatory problems. And this state, I'm going to give it a name just to refer to it more simply. I'm going to call it PUFA overload. Once you've gotten to the point where you have so much PUFA that your antioxidant enzyme systems can't always keep up, or they're not always functional enough in every single tissue, then from time to time in certain tissues, you're going to experience PUFA overload and spontaneous development of toxins. And I'm saying this is how we get disease, this development of toxin from our own tissues, from our own cell membranes. If this happens in a nerve cell, it can kill the nerve cell or cause dysfunction to the nerve cell. You get this happening enough, you get neurological disease. You can get Alzheimer's, you can get Parkinson's, any kind of degenerative neurologic disease can form because of PUFA overload happening in the central nervous system. The same kind of process can affect your lipoproteins, the cholesterol-carrying particles in your blood. So if you don't have enough antioxidants to protect the fat as it travels through your bloodstream, then the LDL particles become little toxin delivery vehicles, and you get arteriosclerosis, and you can get heart attacks and strokes. So this PUFA deterioration and PUFA overload state is the problem, it's a very simple explanation that explains like every single terrible disease that people are now suffering with. You don't need to go beyond this. I mean, this will explain a whole lot of it. It won't explain why some people get, why Alzheimer's runs in some people's families and why, say, lupus or Parkinson runs in other people's families. That's genetic, and that has to do with what tissues your body is less able to, or just has more PUFA exposure or is less able to protect. The PUFA with, has less enzyme systems in those tissues. But this is the cause. PUFA overload is the cause of our chronic diseases. So the more your body gets depleted of antioxidants, the more your body fat becomes a problem, because it will cause PUFA overload when cells try to burn it. Your body fat can become a source of PUFA overload once it interacts with the activated oxygen in the mitochondria, and any tissue that it gets delivered to then, any cell that PUFA from your body fat gets delivered to will develop problems, can cause cell toxicity. This is something Question: should you even be trying to burn your body fat once you get to this state? This is an important question, and it's something we should be talking about, but we can't, because the American Heart Association and Harvard won't even clue doctors in to the basics of seed oil toxicity. So we're very far from having a national level, medical consensus about what is the best way to handle our national obesity crisis. But I have answers. So let's take a look at how healthy body fat becomes energy. So going back in time, we can figure out that healthy body fat has a very low PUFA content, somewhere around 5%. And going back in time, we can look at what was the ratio of other fatty acids. So it was 25% saturated fatty acid, more or less. These are all more or less. It might range from 20 to 30 different individuals differences. And 55% monounsaturated. Now these are the stable fats that are very resistant to that oxygen attack I was showing you a couple slides ago. And very little, somewhere between 2 and 4% of each of the omegas. So not much of the unstable fats. So this is historical body fat. And then if you want to know like what is the best fuel for mitochondria, you can simply ask it. Like a lot of us, your mitochondria are picky eaters. But you can design a simple experiment and get the answer to the question. So here's what they did. This is from a study that was done a couple of decades ago now and has been replicated. This is a mitochondrial test chamber where they gave the mitochondria in the study different fats and tested to see how much energy the cell in the mitochondria continue to produce, right? So this is energy versus time from the start of the test. And when they start the test and you give it monounsaturated fatty acid, the kind that's in olive oil, and the kind that actually our body prefers to store, it actually goes above baseline. Saturated stays right around baseline. This tells you that like nature kind of designed body fat pretty smartly. That's actually mitochondria do better with monounsaturated fat, and on a healthy diet we have tons of monounsaturated fat in our body fat. But they also tested the two most common types of polyunsaturated fatty acids in our diet, an omega-6 and an omega-3. And as you can see, after just a short amount of time here, during which the antioxidants are getting depleted, right? So I said that our cells have the capacity to prevent oxidation. We have antioxidant enzyme systems, but you can overwhelm those systems. And so when you give pure omega-6 and omega-3, you start to overwhelm those systems in a matter of minutes, and then energy production starts to drop off dramatically. And as you can see, the omega-3 is even a worse fuel for our cells than omega-6. And that's exactly what you would predict from the chemistry, because the omega-3 has, from that slide I showed you earlier, has a larger zone of oxygen attack. And it indeed is a more rapid reaction and a more rapid deterioration into toxins, and more problematic when you force your mitochondria to burn PUFA. It's worse if you force your mitochondria to burn omega-3. And that's, I think, a very important, it's important to highlight right now that they've done a lot of studies on, are there health benefits from adding omega-3 supplementation into your diet? And the answer has been a resounding not always. And that's because it has to do with the fact that you are maybe giving it to somebody who's already reached the PUFA overload threshold, their antioxidants have been depleted and they can't handle anymore. Or you may be giving it to somebody who has a deficiency and you're correcting it and you make everything work better. So you have to know the state that you're in to know whether or not you can actually supplement with omega-3 and have it be effective. Oh, and by the way, have it not kill you. Because there are studies that show that some people, when they get omega-3 supplementation, it increases their chance of dying. You get something called sudden cardiac death, which is where your heart has an arrhythmia and stops. And seed oils, omega-3 fatty acids, have been shown to increase that in some people. Increase the risk, I mean, in some studies. So back in the day, body fat was top grade fuel. And that makes sense because that's how we store most of our energy. We're supposed to be able to burn our body fat between meals, and we're supposed to be able to go a long time between meals without being the slightest bit bothered by not eating. But today, body fat is high PUFA, and so high PUFA that it force feeds our mitochondria PUFA that they don't want. When there's just a little, the mitochondria can avoid it because it gets slurped up by other parts of the cell that wanted the PUFA for basic building blocks, and what's left for energy usage is the perfect fuels, mono, unsaturated, and saturated fatty acids. But these days, there's just so much PUFA coming out of our body fat that you are force-feeding it to your mitochondria, essentially, and you're forcing them to become toxin-generating machines and make your cells sick with inflammation and deprive your cells of energy. What I'm saying is that PUFA in our body fat from eating too many seed oils causes body fat to fail. So when we're looking at people who are overweight and we're judging them, I want you to see that they are people who are suffering from failure of a major organ in their body. And it's actually the largest organ in the body. And it's an undiagnosed problem, right? So I'm telling you this, you probably haven't heard this before, neither has their doctor. No one is helping people who are overweight understand the problem that they really have, that their adipose tissue is storing too much PUFA, and that has made the largest organ in the human body an ineffective organ. They have organ damage, and they need proper medical treatment. So if this sounds like you, how can you tell? I mean, how can you tell? If you've been eating a lot of seed oils, are there symptoms? How do you know? Well, there's two ways. One way is if you have any kind of inflammatory disease, PUFA overload is almost definitely a major contributor, like 80–90% contributor. So I'm talking about recurring allergies, asthma, eczema, migraines, fatty liver, heartburn, gastroesophageal reflux disease, any kind of cardiovascular disease, psoriasis, just to name a few, is coming. If you have that, it's coming from the toxicity of seed oils and the fact that when oxygen attacks PUFA and creates free radicals, it promotes inflammation. That's why you're suffering from an inflammatory problem. And if you've had trouble losing weight, this is another way you can tell. If you feel, when you try to not eat, right? You try to cut back on your calories. You try to quit your afternoon snack. And that affects your energy or your mood, or you get so hungry you can't concentrate. That's PUFA overload shutting down energy production in your mitochondria. It's the seed oils. There's actually a growing movement of people talking about their experiences and like their wonderful experiences and recoveries they've had avoiding seed oils, because the impact is truly life-changing, as you might imagine. So far, I think it's probably pretty clear that toxins can promote inflammation and disease. So how does this translate, though, to overeating and your cells needing sugar? That's the third step on the seed oil wheel of misfortune I want to get to. When your mitochondria have to burn PUFA, they have a problem. What are they gonna do? Well, your cells do exactly what you do when you feel like you need energy. Your cells go after sugar. Just like most of the break rooms at work that I've ever been to, there's always some kind of a tempting snack there. Well, there's always some kind of a source of sugar in your bloodstream. But unfortunately, unlike break rooms, there's only a very limited supply of sugar in your bloodstream, and it's not always enough for all of your cells. There's 4 grams. If you have a normal blood sugar of, say, 80 to 100 milligrams per deciliters, it's American units, then you have 1 teaspoon, less than a teaspoon actually, of sugar in your entire 1.5 gallons of blood, which you have 1.5 gallons if you're a 70 kilogram man or normal weight man. So that's not enough. That's not enough for all of your cells. And when your cells have to use more of the sugar proportionally that's in your bloodstream than nature ever intended, this drops your blood sugar level and it makes you very hungry. It's an unhealthy kind of hunger. It's not a normal, this is not a guy who's experiencing normal hunger. We have a name for it because it's so common now. We call it HANGRY. It's a mixture of hungry and angry, if you've never heard it. I had never heard it until about 20 years ago. It wasn't a thing when I was little. Hungry was something that would go away if your mom told you to go back outside and play until dinner. They'll be ready in an hour. This person's not experiencing normal hunger. He's in the middle of a metabolic emergency because his blood sugar level is dropping. And the medical term for this is hypoglycemia. So when your cells have to go after all the sugar, you can get hypoglycemia. You can also get hypoglycemia if you're a type 1 diabetic and you overinject insulin. But this happens today in people who are not overinjecting insulin because our body fat doesn't serve as fuel the way nature intended. And all our cells suddenly have to go after sugar when we go too long without eating. If I didn't say it, hypoglycemia simply means low blood sugar. And low blood sugar causes, yes, hungriness, but not normal hunger. It's an insane, uncontrollable hunger. And it causes a whole bunch of other symptoms. It can make you sweat, it can make you tired, it can make you shaky and jittery, it can make you anxious, it can give you headaches, it can give you brain fog. People tell me all the time they experience brain fog because they didn't eat their snack. And it can cause heart palpitations. People have gone to the emergency room because of this. It can even bring on seizures if you're somebody who has a seizure disorder. But it's so when you saw, if you have seen your doctor for this problem, he probably just told you, oh yeah, it's hypoglycemia. You just need to eat something. You know, don't go too long without snacking. And this is why we gain weight. If you have to snack, you know, a couple times a week or maybe every day or even a couple times a day, you're going to end up overeating. It's inevitable. And I believe this is the reason. And you might have heard the statistic that that Americans are overweight because we way overeat. We eat, on average, 3,600 calories when we need, on average, somewhere maybe 2,400. So that's why we're gaining weight. There isn't a mystery. The reason we are eating so much and not even aware of it is because a lot of us are medically told we have to eat more. Doesn't that just make you think? If your doctor says, oh, well, you got to eat to raise your blood sugar, doesn't that make you just think that you weren't eating enough? But that's not the case. As I just said, what's actually happening is because our blood sugar is only got the 4 teaspoons in there, 4 grams of, our blood only has 4 grams of sugar. That is nowhere near enough. And we're fueling on the wrong kind of fuel in 2 ways, right? So first, our body fat is full of PUFA and it can't give us energy, drops our blood sugar, so we get hangry, makes us want to snack on sugar. Neither one of those, PUFA and sugar, are not the ideal fuel. The ideal fuel is saturated in monounsaturated fatty acid. That is what used to be the majority fats in our body before PUFAs flooded our seed supply. Before PUFAs flooded our food supply. Sorry. And it's not just that you want to snack, you truly do need to snack because you are experiencing a metabolic emergency. Not having enough energy is a problem. It's something you can't just push past, right? I mean, maybe you can if you have enough adrenaline or you get your cortisol. These are, if you get stressed enough, you can rev up enough adrenaline and cortisol because these 2 hormones help you kind of loosen up some sugar that might be hiding in the nooks and crannies of your liver. Or they also do something really bad. They help you convert protein into sugar, which makes you lose muscle mass. Very bad. But you need to snack because what's happening is your brain is dysfunctional. Your brain is the most energy-hungry organ in your body, using about 10 times more calories per minute than Joe average other organ, because it's got an electrical grid to maintain. It's a very expensive organ, and it's very expensive to maintain that electrical grid. Even if you don't use your brain very much or don't feel like you're using your brain very much, you're not concentrating very hard, you're still maintaining that electrical grid so that your brain will work when you need it. And disrupted brain function is what hangry is. So if you get hangry, you are experiencing disrupted brain function, and you can't just let it go. It's not something that willpower can overcome. And that's what I think is like a really, really important thing for a lot of people who struggle with their weight to hear, because it's not you, it's a metabolic problem, it's your metabolism. This is research that shows what happens with your mental functioning when your blood sugar level drops. So this study gave folks something that would cause their blood sugar level to drop, and they gave them a medication, and then they just measured how well they performed on certain psychological tests. And they found that, yeah, the brain function was really just disrupted in ways that made them irritable and angry and just in a bad mood, and all kinds of things that you probably have experienced or witnessed when people don't get to eat when they have this metabolic problem, which many, many people do have now. So this has implications, because it means that your metabolism, what's in your body fat, is probably impairing your ability to function at work or at home or at school. It has been tied to marital discord, or arguing. People are always in this state of irritability. They're going to argue more. Their brains aren't working right. They don't understand what each other's saying. That's a recipe for an argument. This is a good one, because it shows that if you kind of preload people with sugar, it puts them into a good mood. Now, why that is really terrible is because imagine how it's going to affect your psychology if you feel like you need to have something sweet before you're comfortable in social situations, or you just, you feel like you need to load up on food, or you have to be eating if you're at a party. It's really unnatural state, and we don't like this feeling of being mentally slow that we get when our blood sugar levels are low. So it just rewires our entire relationship with food. It's a recipe for a dysfunctional relationship with food. And it impairs something called executive function. So cognitive executive function, thinking, planning, strategizing. What do you do at the end of a workday when you're driving home and you're tired, you can't think straight, you're trying to figure out what to make for dinner? Well, I can tell you that's exactly where the processed food and the fast food companies want you to be. Because in that state, if you drive by the Golden Arches and you have no clue what you're going to be feeding everybody for dinner, well, there's an answer. There's an easy answer. Just take a right. So this is a benefit. This is something that there's so many people who are benefiting from it. That right there is kind of an explanation as to why you haven't heard this before. Okay, so this also, now here we are at our fourth stop on the seed oil wheel of misfortune. You crave foods that raise your blood sugar fast. And because when you taste, okay, so there's two things that sugar does to you. One of them you've heard about before, right? It gives you kind of like a pleasure boost. And sugar can be very addicting for that pleasure boost. But what I'm saying is it does something else. It causes, when your blood sugar is low and your brain learns that when you eat something sweet, it works better, you become addicted to sugar for another reason, for energy. And that is a much more powerful addiction, because without energy, your brain can die, your brain cells can die. That's why strokes kill brain cells, because the energy deficit that happens. Most people talk about sugar being addicting for its taste. And what I'm saying is, yeah, that's true. I was a sugar addict myself. But I'm saying that you have no chance of extracting yourself from that addictive relationship with sugar until you get your body and your brain some other form of energy, until you fix your metabolic addiction to sugar. And until you do that, you're stuck on this cycle, because when you crave junk, very often it's loaded with seed oils too. Potato chips, French fries, any fast food, anything that's not pure sugar is going to be loaded with seed oils too. So you just go around and around the cycle. Now I just want to give you a little bit of a happy ending here. So there's hope. If this sounds like you, what you need is a plan to get off seed oils. It's very simple conceptually to not eat seed oils. And it's also very simple to just learn what exactly you need to do instead. There's 5 steps. I list them for free on my website. One of them is eat healthy fats. Another one is eat carbohydrate that breaks down slowly in your digestive system. Like, instead of super sugary foods, have beans. People struggle, this is a very touching letter I got from somebody who became my patient after he somehow stumbled into my website, and he just describes the situation, I think, very eloquently, that I believe a lot of people experience. He just put it into words in a really great way. Just that how he was feeling. He was so out of control with his diet. All he could do was just pray that he wouldn't be struck down with a heart attack and leave his daughter and his wife a widow. And when he came to understand that it's his metabolism revitalized his hope, because he thought he had like some kind of horrible character flaw, and it wasn't him, it was his metabolism, bottom line. It can even help people who you might think are hopelessly addicted to foods and alcohol and probably other drugs, because you are just in such an unhealthy metabolic state. And clearing your body of the seed oils and revitalizing your metabolism so that you can burn your body fat again for fuel, it energizes you in a way that you may never have experienced, or it may have been such a long time ago. It's just you don't even remember it anymore. I also want to point out that a lot of folks will try to tell you, oh, this is just like the latest fad to say seed oils are unhealthy. And what I want to like just forget that. That is just because either they don't understand or they're on purpose trying to get you to eat more seed oils. Seed oils are the original problem. They've been problematic for us ever since they came into our food supply nearly 100 years ago, and they are the reason that we have all these obesity epidemics, and they are not just the latest thing. They were the original thing. They are the reason we now have 85% of adult Americans with excess body fat. This is showing that about 70-75% are actually like in the overweight or obese category. But it's also showing that even people whose weight is normal have a higher percentage of body fat than normal, because they're so malnourished and they don't have enough lean tissue. Their body is possibly breaking down their lean tissue to turn it into sugar for their sugar addicted cells. And this is not your fault. All you have to do is say goodbye to seed oils and say hello to your superpower. Because just imagine what you can accomplish when you have energy to burn.